They mocked her body, saying she would never be a wife, much less a mother. But when a widowed Apache warrior fell wounded at her feet, she cared for him and ended up healing the broken heart of a little girl who just needed a hug. The Arizona sun beat down on the earth like a branding iron. Clara May walked slowly along the dusty trail, carrying the weight of her large body and her broken heart. 27, unmarried, invisible. In town, people looked away when she passed, not out of malice, out of pity. Clara knew the difference. Pity hurt more. Poor Clara May, the women would whisper at the general store. Such a good girl, too bad. Too bad she was too big, too strong, too different. Clara clenched her fists. She didn't want pity, she never did. She just wanted to be seen, to be heard, to be touched with truth, not with sorrow. The wind blew hot, stirring up dust. She pulled the shawl over her broad shoulders and kept walking. She was going to get firewood for her Aunt Meredith, as she always did. A man's job, they said. But Clara did it without complaining. She did everything without complaining. That's when she heard the crying, a low, muffled sound. Different. Clara stopped, listened. The crying came from behind the red rocks, where the cacti grew twisted and the snakes hid from the sun. She should have kept going. It wasn't her problem. But the crying continued, thin, desperate. A child. Clara dropped her wicker basket on the ground and ran. She found them behind a fallen log. A man was leaning against the dry wood, covered in dust and blood. A 5-year-old girl was beside him, crying softly, her little hands gripping his arm. Apache. Clara's heart pounded, not from fear, from something else, urgent. The warrior had a gaping wound in his abdomen. Dark blood stained his torn shirt. His eyes were closed, but his chest rose and fell slowly. He was still breathing. The girl looked up at Clara, black hair in small braids, dark eyes filled with tears. She spoke in Apache, fast words that Clara didn't understand but felt. Help, please, don't let him die. Clara knelt on the hot earth. The warrior opened his eyes when he felt the movement. He looked at her, dark, distrustful. He tried to push her away with a weak gesture. Easy, Clara said, her voice coming out hoarse. I'll help you. He shook his head. Don't take me. I don't trust white people. Clara looked into his eyes. She saw pain, not just from his body, from his soul. She knew that pain. I'm just a woman, she said slowly. I don't want anything from you. I just won't let you die here. She tore a piece of her own skirt without a second thought. The blue fabric became an improvised bandage. She pressed it against the wound. The warrior moaned softly, but he didn't push her away. Clara's hands were trembling, not from fear, from something she had never felt before. Purpose. The girl stopped, crying. She watched Clara carefully. She spoke in Apache again, more slowly. What's your name? Clara asked, trying to smile. The girl pointed to herself. Tahane. Tahane, Clara repeated. That's a beautiful name. The warrior tried to speak, but the words came out weakly. My daughter! Clara felt something shift in her chest. This man was dying. But even so, the only thing that mattered was his daughter. What is your name? She asked. He studied her with tired eyes. Nashoba. Nashoba, she repeated. I'll take care of both. Of you. He tried to protest, but his strength was leaving him. His eyes closed again. Clara worked quickly. She cleaned the blood, tightened the bandage, and improvised some shade with her skirt tied to the dry branches. Tahane watched her every move, quiet now. The sun began to set. Clara couldn't carry him alone. Nashoba was big, muscular, even when wounded. But she could protect him. She could stay. And she did. The night came, cold, as it always did in the desert. Clara huddled next to Nashoba, Tahane sleeping between them. The warrior was delirious with fever. He spoke in Apache, words that sounded like prayers or laments. Clara wet his lips with water from her canteen. She ran her hand over his hot forehead. She didn't know why. She just knew she couldn't stop. Tahane stirred in her sleep. She leaned against Clara's arm, trusting. For the first time in 27 years, Clara felt that someone needed her, truly, not out of obligation, not out of pity, out of pure necessity. Tears ran down her dust-stained face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of finding, of discovery. Clara May had spent her whole life feeling too big, too strong, too different. Now, in the middle of nowhere, with a wounded warrior and a lost little girl, she was exactly the right size. The first day passed slowly. Neshoba drifted in and out of consciousness. Clara improvised bandages, fetched water from distant wells, and shared the food she had between him and Tahane. The little girl began to say a few words in English. "Clara, Mom," she would say, mixing the two languages. Each time she heard it, Clara's heart swelled in a good way. Neshoba watched in silence when he was conscious. He didn't thank her, but he didn't push her away either. Clara noticed his eyes following her movements, studying, trying to understand. Why was a white woman taking care of an Apache? Why didn't she run away? Why didn't she get help? Clara had no answers. She only had one certainty. She was where she was supposed to be. On the second day, she managed to make a thin soup with flour and water. Tahane ate it with gusto, getting some on her chin. She laughed for the first time. The sound of her laughter was like music. Neshoba took a few spoonfuls. He looked at Clara. "Why?" he asked simply. Clara stopped stirring the improvised pot. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just know that when I saw you two, I couldn't leave. White people don't like Indians. I'm not like other white people." Neshoba studied her for a long time. "No," he finally said. "You're not." That night, the fever broke. Neshoba was able to stay awake for longer. Clara told him about her life in town, how she felt invisible, how people looked at her. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, they were silent. Only the wind blew among the cacti. "My wife," Neshoba said slowly. "She was small, fast, a warrior." Clara felt a pang. Jealousy? No. Understanding. "What happened to her?" "Scalp hunters. They killed her and others from the tribe. I wasn't there to protect them." The pain in his voice was as real as the blood Clara had cleaned. She understood. Neshoba carried guilt, just as she carried rejection. "I'm so sorry. I swore I would never trust white people again. I would never let anyone get close to Tahane again." Clara looked at the little girl sleeping between them. "And now," Neshoba met her eyes in the dark, "now I don't know anything anymore." On the third day, he managed to sit up. The wound still hurt, but it was no longer bleeding. Clara changed the bandage carefully. Her hands were steady, gentle. "You're good at this," he said. "My mother was a midwife. I learned a little." Their hands touched when she passed him the bandage. For a second, neither of them moved. Clara felt warmth rise up her arm. Neshoba didn't pull his hand away. "Clara," he said her name for the first time. "Yes?" "Thank you." They were only 2 words, but they came from the heart. Clara smiled, a genuine smile, not a forced one. "You're welcome, Neshoba." Tahane woke up and found them like that, close, talking softly. She smiled too and threw herself into Clara's lap. "Clara, Mom," she said happily. Neshoba watched the scene. Something changed in his face. The hardness lessened. For a moment, he looked like an ordinary man, a father, a man who could love again. Clara felt the change too. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel too big or too different. She felt right. in the right place, with the right people. The desert around them was arid, dangerous, full of threats. But there, in that small circle of earth between the rocks, there was something rare. There was peace. Clara didn't know that. The peace was about to end. She didn't know about the eyes that were watching them from the distant hills. She didn't know that her life was about to be turned upside down. For now, there was only the moment, Nashoba getting better, Tahane laughing, Clara feeling needed. For now, it was enough. The trouble started on the morning of the fourth day. Clara was washing clothes in the nearby stream when she heard the horses. 3 men came down the hill, rifles in their hands, their hats stained with dust. Scalp hunters. Clara recognized the type by their eyes, cold, calculating, thirsty for native blood. She ran back to Nashoba and Tahane. The warrior was already alert, his hand searching for the knife at his waist. "How many?" he asked softly. 3, Clara whispered, armed. Nashoba tried to stand up, but he was still weak. The wound had scarred, but his body needed time. Time they didn't have. "Take Tahane and go," he ordered. "No." "Clara." "I said no." Her voice came out firm. For the first time, Clara May didn't obey. She didn't accept. She didn't hide. The men got closer. Clara stood in front of Nashoba and the girl, her arms spread wide. Her heart was beating like a war drum, but she didn't back down. "Morning, ma'am," said the leader, a thin man with a scar on his face. "Seen any Indians around here?" "No," Clara lied without hesitation. "Why do you ask?" "Apache tracks in the area. A good scalp is worth good money." Clara felt nauseous. They spoke of Nashoba as if he were an animal, as if Tahane were a trophy. "I haven't seen anything," she repeated. The man with the scar got off his horse. He walked slowly, studying the improvised camp. He saw the pot, the torn cloths, the bloody bandages. "Someone got hurt here," he observed. "Fresh blood. I cut myself on the firewood," Clara said quickly. "I'm clumsy." He smiled, a joyless smile. "Are you?" That's when he saw Tahane moving behind Clara. The girl tried to hide better, but it was too late. Well, the hunter murmured. "What do we have here?" Clara felt her world collapse, but she didn't move out of the way. "She's my adopted daughter," she lied desperately. "I took her in as an orphan in town." The man laughed loudly. "Adopted daughter? This one's a pure Apache, Mom. Look at those features, that hair." Tahane started crying softly. Clara bent down and pulled her close, protectively. "She's my daughter," she repeated forcefully. "And the father?" the hunter asked maliciously. "Where's this little Indian girl's father?" That's when Nashoba stood up, slowly, swaying but on his feet, the knife in his hand, his dark eyes fixed on the enemy. "Here," he said simply. The 3 men pointed their rifles at the same time. Clara didn't think. She threw herself in front of Nashoba, her arms open. "No!" "Get out of the way, woman," the hunter shouted. "This savage is worth $50 over my dead body." Nashoba pulled her by the arm. "Clara, get out." "I won't," she shouted, turning to him. "I won't get out of the way and you won't die. Not today, not ever." The words came from the depths of her soul. Clara didn't know where so much strength, so much certainty came from. She just knew she wouldn't let anyone hurt her family. Her family. The word echoed in her mind like thunder. Nashoba and Tahane were her family, the only true family she had ever had. The hunter spat on the ground. "You're protecting a savage, Mom. That's a crime against civilization." "Civilization?" Clara laughed bitterly. "What civilization kills an innocent child? An Indian child isn't innocent. It's a plague. It's a problem." Clara felt anger rise like fire. Pure, clean, true anger. Nashoba placed his hand on her shoulder, trying to calm her down. But Clara was no longer the same invisible woman from a week ago. "You're the plague," she said with an icy voice. "You kill for money. You hunt people like animals. If anyone here isn't civilized, it's you." The man with the scar turned red with rage. "Did that Indian wash your brain? Did he put a spell on you?" "Nobody put a spell on me. I just opened my eyes." The hunter raised his rifle. "Last chance. Get out of the way, or you die with him." Clara didn't move. Tahane clung to her skirt. Nashoba stood firm by her side, even though he was wounded. "Then kill me," Clara challenged, "but you'll have to go through me first." There was tense silence. The wind blew through the cacti. A bird sang in the distance. The hunter hesitated. Killing a white woman complicated things, especially a woman who seemed to know people in town. "This isn't over," he finally said, lowering his gun. "We'll tell everyone that Clara May is protecting. Savages! We'll see what her family has to say." The three of them mounted up and rode away, raising dust. Clara collapsed to her knees when they disappeared from sight. Her hands were shaking, her legs couldn't hold her. Nashoba knelt beside her. "You saved our lives." Clara looked at him. She saw gratitude in his dark eyes. But she saw more than that. She saw respect, admiration, something warm and new. "I wasn't going to let them hurt you," she said simply. Tahane threw herself into her arms, crying and speaking in Apache. Nashoba translated, "She's saying you're a warrior with a big heart." Clara laughed through her tears. "A warrior? Me? You faced 3 armed men without flinching," Nashoba said seriously. "If that's not being a warrior, I don't know what is." That afternoon, they returned to town. Clara knew the hunters had already spread the news. She knew her life was about to change forever, and it did. Aunt Meredith was waiting for her at the door of the small house, her lips tight with anger. Neighbors whispered on the sidewalks. Children pointed. "Clara May Johnson," her aunt said with an icy voice. "What is this disgrace?" "What disgrace? Aunt Meredith? Protecting an Indian, sleeping in the wild with a savage. What will people think of us?" Clara looked around. She saw the familiar faces, all with the same expression. Disgust, contempt, betrayal. The same people who called her poor Clara now called her a traitor. "I don't care what they think," Clara said loudly for everyone to hear. "Nashoba and Tahane are my family now." "Your family?" her aunt shouted. "We are your family. Decent, Christian people." "Christian?" Clara laughed joylessly. "What kind of Christianity wants to kill an innocent child? They are not children. They are savages." Clara looked at Tahane, who was holding her hand tightly. The girl didn't understand all the words, but she felt the hatred in the air. "If she's a savage," Clara said slowly, "then so am I." There were shocked murmurs. Aunt Meredith turned pale. "If you stay with these Indians, you're no longer my niece. You can no longer set foot in this house." Clara felt a pain in her chest. It was the only family she had ever known, the only home she had ever had. But she looked at Nashoba, who was waiting for her decision in silence. She looked at Tahane, confident in her protection. "Then I'm no longer your niece," she said firmly. She took the few things she had in the house, some clothes, her dead mother's necklace, the worn Bible. She left without looking back. On the street, people moved away when she passed. Children ran away. Women pulled their skirts away, as if Clara were a contagious disease. For the first time in her life, Clara May was not invisible. She was very visible and hated. But she was not alone. Nashoba walked beside her, his head held high. Tahane was between them, safe. They formed a strange, improvised, impossible family, but it was true. They camped outside of town. Nashoba was stronger now. He could hunt, fish, protect. Clara cooked, took care of Tahane, kept the fire burning. At night, they talked softly, while the girl slept. You lost everything because of us, Neshoba said with guilt. I didn't lose anything, Clara replied. I gained everything. Your family. My true family is right here, she interrupted. With you. Neshoba studied her in the firelight. Why, Clara? Why did you do this? It took Clara a while to answer. She was searching for words to explain what she didn't quite understand. My whole life I was invisible, she finally said. Nobody truly saw me. You saw me. You made me feel needed, important, loved. Loved. The word hung in the air between them. Clara blushed, but she didn't look away. I love you both, she admitted. I love Tahane like a daughter, and you... She stopped. She didn't have the courage to finish. Neshoba approached slowly. He reached out and touched her face carefully. And me? And you? You make me feel whole. He looked at her for a long time. Clara saw a struggle in his eyes, old pain, fear of loving again. My wife, he began. I know, Clara said softly. You loved her. But she's gone, Neshoba, and you have the right to be happy again. I'm not easy to love. I carry a lot of anger, a lot of pain. I'm not easy to love either, Clara laughed softly. I'm too big, too stubborn, too different. Neshoba smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen on his face. No, he said slowly. You're perfect. They kissed slowly, carefully. A kiss of recognition, not of passion. A kiss that said, I see. You, I accept you, I choose you. When they separated, Clara felt that something fundamental had changed in her. The invisible woman was dying. A new Clara was being born, a Clara who knew her worth, but the happiness was short-lived. In the following days, the persecution intensified. Scalp hunters visited the camp regularly. Men from the town made threats. Tahane couldn't play far away without supervision. One night, Neshoba called her to talk. I have to leave, he said directly. Go back to my people. The two of you aren't safe with me. We'll go with you, Clara. My people won't accept you easily. A white woman among the Apache? Let me earn their trust, the way I earned yours. Neshoba sighed. It will be dangerous. Difficult. More difficult than living hated in town. More dangerous than facing scalp hunters alone. He smiled despite his worry. When did you become so stubborn? Since I found a cause worth fighting for. They left the next morning before dawn. They took little with them. Water, food, Neshoba's. Weapons, Clara's determination. The road to the Apache lands was long and dangerous. But for the first time in her life, Clara May wasn't running away from something. She was running toward her destiny, and her destiny had a name, family, love, belonging, things worth risking everything for. The journey lasted 5 arduous days. Through the desert, Clara never imagined she could walk so far, endure so much sun, so much thirst. But next to Neshoba and Tahane, every step seemed possible. On the 5th day, they reached the lands of Neshoba's people. The Apache camp was spread out among red rocks and dry bushes, leather tents, low fires, children running among the adults. When they saw Neshoba arrive with a white woman, everyone stopped what they were doing. The silence was absolute. Clara felt dozens of eyes on her, distrust as heavy as lead. An elderly woman spat on the ground when she saw her. A young warrior muttered something in Apache that sounded like an insult. Neshoba spoke with the chief, a gray-haired man with scars on his face. The conversation was long, intense. Clara didn't understand the words, but she felt the tension. Finally, Neshoba came back to her. You can stay, he said softly, but you'll have to prove your worth. Prove that you're not an enemy. Clara nodded. She had expected this. How? By working. by showing respect, by learning our customs. And if I can't? Neshoba touched her face. Carefully. You can. You're stronger than you think. The first few days were the hardest of Clara's life. The Apache women treated her with coldness. They gave orders in Apache, knowing she wouldn't understand. They laughed when she tried to make baskets, and they came out crooked. They whispered when she passed. Clara didn't complain. She didn't cry. She worked twice as hard. She carried water, helped cook, took care of the younger children. When someone got hurt, she treated the wounds with skill. Slowly, very slowly, the hostility began to lessen. Tahane was her salvation. The girl ran between the two cultures, translating, explaining, and defending Clara when needed. "Clara Mum is good," she would say to anyone who would listen. "Clara Mum saved me." One night after 2 weeks in the camp, Clara was sewing by the firelight when a woman approached her. It was Ayana, Neshoba's younger sister. She had lost her husband in the same attack that killed her brother's wife. "You love him," she said in broken English. Clara stopped sewing. "I do. He has suffered a lot. Since Haloki died, he is not the same man." "I know." Ayana sat down next to her. "Haloki was my friend, small, brave, full of fire. You are different." Clara lowered her head. "I know I'll never be like her." "No," Ayana agreed. "You are better." Clara looked up, surprised. "Haloki was a warrior of the body. You are a warrior of the soul. Neshoba needs that now. He needs peace, not war." It was the first time someone from the tribe had recognized her worth. Clara felt warm tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Ayana smiled. "You are becoming one of us, Clara, sister." Clara, sister. The name sounded like music, but the peace was short-lived. The following week, bad news arrived. American soldiers were moving into the area. There were rumors of a new attack on the Apache lands. The chief called a war council. Clara watched from a distance, worried. She saw Neshoba speaking with the elders, planning a defense. She saw warriors sharpening spears and checking rifles. Fear spread like wildfire. That's when the messenger arrived. A young Apache, covered in dust and blood, brought news that chilled everyone to the bone. A military detachment was on its way, led by a local merchant, someone who knew the Apache territory well, someone who had provided information about the camps. The name of the civilian leader made Clara stumble. Robert Hartwell, Aunt Meredith's husband, Clara's uncle. Neshoba saw her reaction. "You know this man?" Clara couldn't speak. Memories came back like a flood. Uncle Robert always disappearing for days, always having new money when he returned, always asking about Indian movements in the area. "Clara," Neshoba insisted, "who is this man?" "My uncle," she whispered. "Aunt Meredith's husband." The entire camp fell into a deathly silence. Everyone looked at Clara with renewed suspicion. "Your uncle," the chief repeated, his voice icy. "The man who kills our people." Clara felt her world collapse. She understood everything at once. Uncle Robert was not just a merchant. He was an informant, a spy, a traitor who sold information about Apache territories to the army. And she was his family. "I didn't know," she stammered desperately. "I swear I didn't know." Angry murmurs spread. Some warriors picked up their weapons. Clara was a relative of the enemy. Was she a spy too? "I never betrayed you," she shouted. "Never!" "Prove it," the chief said coldly. "How?" "Your uncle is coming with soldiers. You will go to him. You will find out how many there are, where they will attack. You will bring us the information." Clara felt her heart race. It was a trap. If she went, she might never return. Uncle Robert would kill her if he found out she was with the Apache, but if she didn't go, she would be expelled from the tribe. She would lose Neshoba, Tahane, the only family she had ever truly loved. "I'll go," she said firmly. Neshoba pulled her by the arm. "Clara, no, it's too dangerous. I have to prove I'm not a traitor. I have to protect you. I won't let you." "Go alone. You have to," she said, touching his face. "This is my battle now." She left the next morning, alone on horseback, scared but determined. Clara May had spent her whole life running from conflicts. Now she was riding straight into the biggest conflict of her life. She found the military camp at noon, 40 soldiers, well-armed, well-organized, and in the center of it all, directing the preparations, was Uncle Robert. Clara took a deep breath and rode toward him. "Clara May," he shouted when he saw her. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Looking for you, Uncle Robert," she said, getting off her horse. "How did you know where I was?" "I followed the tracks. I need to talk to you." Robert looked around, suspicious. "About what?" "About the Apache you're hunting." His face changed. It became hard, dangerous. "What do you know about that?" "I know you're making money, selling information. I know you've killed innocent people." "Innocent?" He laughed bitterly. "Savages aren't innocent, Clara May. They're problems that need to be solved." "Like Neshoba's wife? Was she a problem too?" Robert turned pale. "How did you... Where did you hear that name?" "Neshoba is my husband," Clara said loud and clear. The silence was absolute. Soldiers stopped what they were doing to listen. Robert turned red with anger and shame. "Your husband," he stammered. "You married a savage." "I married the most honorable man I've ever met, something you've never been." Robert lost his temper. He pulled out his pistol, pointed it at Clara. "You're a traitor to your own race," he shouted. "You deserve to die like the savages you protect." Clara didn't back down. She looked directly into the barrel of the gun. "Then kill me, Uncle Robert. But know that you're killing the only person in your family who still loved you." His hand trembled. For a moment, Clara saw the man he was before greed consumed him, the man who carried her on his shoulders when she was a child. "Please, Clara May," he whispered. "Come home. Forget about these Indians. There's still time." "My home is with them. My family is them." "Then you've chosen your side." "I have. And you?" Robert looked at her for a long time. Clara saw the internal struggle in his eyes. Family versus money, love versus hate. The money won. "Soldiers!" he shouted. "Arrest this woman! She's an Apache spy!" Clara didn't resist when they tied her up. She had gotten the information she needed. 40 soldiers, an attack planned for dawn, the route through the northern pass. At night, when everyone was asleep, she managed to escape. She cut the ropes on a sharp stone and ran through the desert. She ran as she had never run before, guided by the stars and by love. She arrived at the Apache camp just before dawn. She shouted the alarm, passed on the information, and helped organize the defense. When the soldiers arrived through the northern pass, the Apache were ready. The ambush was perfect. No civilian casualties, no unnecessary deaths. Just a fair defense of their lands. Uncle Robert was captured alive. Clara asked to speak with him one last time. "You can still change," she said. "You can still choose to do the right thing." He spat at her feet. "I'd rather die than ask for forgiveness from savages." Clara felt a deep sadness, not anger, sadness for the man he could have been. "Then die knowing that you lost the only family you had," she said softly. It was the last time they spoke. After the battle, the Apache chief called Clara to him. "You have proven your worth," he said solemnly. "You risked your life for us. You betrayed your own family for us. Now you are one of us," Clara cried, with relief, with joy, with a sense of belonging. That night there was a ceremony. Clara received an Apache name, Brave Heart. She received a sacred necklace, blessings from the elders, a permanent place in the tribe. And she married Neshoba, There was no church, no priest, no signed paper. There was a circle of stones under the stars, ancestral chants, promises made to the wind and the earth. Ayana braided flowers into Clara's hair. Tahane scattered petals on the ground. When Nashoba kissed her as his wife, Clara felt that she was finally complete. The invisible woman had died. Brave Heart was born, a warrior, a wife, a mother. 6 months later, Clara found out she was expecting a child. Nashoba cried when she told him. A man's tears, a man who hadn't cried in years. A father's tears, a husband's tears, a man who had learned to love again. "Will it be a boy or a girl?" he asked, his hand on her still small belly. "It doesn't matter," Clara smiled. "It will be ours." The baby was born the following spring, a strong boy with his father's dark eyes and his mother's determination. They named him New Day because he represented a beginning, hope, and the future. Clara breastfed her son in the shade of the cacti, Tahane playing nearby, Nashoba taking care of the horses. The family that seemed impossible was real, it was strong, it was eternal. Sometimes, when the wind blew from the direction of the town, Clara thought about the life she had left behind. The small house, Aunt Meredith, the neighbors who despised her. She didn't feel longing, she felt gratitude. Gratitude for having had the courage to choose. Gratitude for having found who she really was. Gratitude for having discovered that true love doesn't see skin color, culture, or differences. It only sees heart. Clara May was born invisible. She died invisible. But Brave Heart lived forever. Loved, seen, needed. Mother of 2 children, wife of a warrior, daughter of an entire tribe. And when the sun set over the desert, painting the sky red and gold, Clara held her husband's hand and knew she was exactly where she was supposed to be. At home. Finally, at home.